Thank you all so much for rocking up and sharing a little bit of time this afternoon. It's great to be back in the office. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to tell you a story that both began and ended in this pretty strange place, the South Geographic Pole, where all of the lines meet. But I'd like to go back and share where it all started. It started with this mad old man, my father, Robert Swan. He is the first person in history to ski to both North and the South Pole back in the 80s on incredibly hardy expeditions. He was walking in these gentlemen's footsteps, Captain Scott and Shackleton, the really early explorers at the turn of the 20th century. And he really wanted to do justice of what they put themselves through. He went and did a 900-mile journey to the South Pole, a 700-mile journey to the North Pole without radio communication, without safety net that we can experience today. And he pulled these expeditions off. Very surprisingly, to be honest, everyone said that he would die, but he didn't. He did lose 45 kilos skiing to the South Pole, so pretty hardy expeditions to say the least. But after coming back from these trips, he got charged by Jacques Cousteau, the oceanographer, to make sure that we have the sense to protect Antarctica after the year 2041. Because right now we actually all own Antarctica. It's a land for science and peace. And there's bases that have claims to Antarctica, but no one actually owns it, which is pretty interesting. And it's a big place. It's twice the size of Australia, 13,000 times the size of Singapore, and has the potential to change our climate more so than anywhere in the world. 90% of the world's ice is in Antarctica. 70% of the world's fresh water is locked within that ice. And there's patches of ice that are miles deep, with the deepest being 16,000 feet of solid ice. And I went into NASA Ames, and they were basically telling us, why is no one listening to what Antarctica is telling us? Is the Larsen B ice shelf, which is on that little tail there, broke off in 2017. That's 5,000 kilometers squared of solid ice breaking off into the ocean, 1 trillion tons worth of ice. And that's only a small, as you can see, compared to some of these other areas of what Antarctica is capable of. And that is what that looked like breaking off. That's 600 feet solid of ice here, which is pretty shocking. 400 above, 200 above, 400 below. And this is really, really, really scary stuff. But instead of being overwhelmed by this, which I think a lot of us can be at times, I really wanted to put a positive spin on this pretty monumental issue that we are facing in Antarctica. And I wanted to focus on something that was relevant to everyone, which I believe CO2 really is relevant. It cuts across all of the sectors, and really is the leading index in regards to our shifting climate. And I think sometimes CO2 can be a bit hard for people to understand because it is a gas. However, this is what it looks like in a solid form. And every day we produce 140 million tons worth of this stuff from all of our industry, the back of our cars, our planes, everything. And that's what that looks like over New York City. And this is a global problem. And well, not so much a problem, but just a reality. Everyone is a part of this. Even if you're only living very, very lean, you still produce CO2. And while globally we produce different amounts, obviously China, US, as you can see, produce a lot. We feel it locally. My grandma lives up in Yorkshire. She's 104. She had her birthday about 3 weeks ago. And she's complaining that it's too hot to sit in her conservatory in summer. And so it's a global problem, but we're all feeling this locally. And I really wanted to put a positive spin on this. So with my father, that madman who skied to the North and South Pole, we wanted to go back to the South Pole on a unique journey, this time powered off clean energy. No one had ever attempted that before. So it took 2 years of preparation, 25 sponsors, and we pulled together the first system that was 100% clean. This is a NASA-designed solar ice melting system. This plugged in here to this little red plug-in here, and in 8 hours we could melt 6 liters of water in minus 45 Celsius, which was a first. And this combined with biofuels made from waste and these vacuum flasks combined with lithium batteries, all of this created an energy system that was 100% unique. And we planted 2,000 trees to offset and make our whole thing carbon positive by about 75%. So that whole system sounded great. That took, as I said, 2 years of planning to make happen. And then suddenly, Martin Barnett, Carl O'Donoghue, myself, my father, are left in the middle of nowhere and told that we had to ski 2 months in one direction. We have 2 months worth of food, 1,000 kilometers, and if we don't do it, we fail. It was quite a poignant moment to be left out there, 24 hours of sun around, wind in your face, and to be honest, all of the pitch and sails to get us down to that point kind of promptly went out the window when you were left in that extreme environment and being told that you have to ski 9 hours a day or you fail. And from the get-go, it became apparent that Antarctica is not a place to mess around. It will literally eat you alive. And these crevasses are not to be messed around with. We almost walked in this one. We weren't quite paying attention. It was a cloudy day, and we had to spend 6 hours skiing, traversing it and then crossing it. So from the get-go, it became apparent that Antarctica is not to be messed around with. And 2 weeks into the journey, it became a reality that my dad at 63 was having a really hard time recovering. This photo was quite poignant. After I took it, he asked me to rub some cream on his face, and I promptly ripped off a bit of his face because of frostbite. And it just really started to hit home that Antarctica was eating us all slowly. And slowly my dad was having a hard time keeping up. He was just lagging behind, and literally he was just sometimes this little dot sort of trailing like the Terminator, sort of one step after another. And he eventually skied up to us and said, "Kyle, Martin, do you have what it takes to reach the South Pole?" And we said, "Yes, we do." And he said, "I just don't have it in me. I'm going to kill myself if I try and do this whole journey." And for him to say that was a very poignant moment, as you can imagine, being the first madman to ski to the North and South Pole. He's a pretty persistent, insane man. And for him to ski up and tell us that was, very humbling. But I think a good thing for him, because I think he needed that pushback, in a sense, from Antarctica. And those last couple of days skiing into the halfway point, Thiel's Mountains, was very poignant, because normally we all ski up together and put our skis next to each other, but he would be sitting at the back like this and just be looking out the back, which was a little bit eerie, to be honest. And it was just poignant to be sharing every day in the tent with him for a month straight, and then slowly just to see him decay and to see him just give up, to be honest, because he just didn't have it in him to do the whole 2-month journey. And he got 450 kilometers into that 1,000-kilometer journey and got pulled out. That was the day he got pulled out. That's not, I'm guessing some of us sometimes look a bit rough on Saturday morning after a Good Friday out, but that's a pretty messed up dude right there. Frostbite on his face, a bit gone, to be honest. And when he got picked up at Thiel's Mountains, it was very poignant. He looked at me and was just like, "My blood is in your blood. Like, you've got this in you, but I'm really sorry I can't do this, but I will kill myself if I keep going." And I think he really would have. He's like a bloodhound, he would have just run himself to death. And those first few days after leaving Thiel's Mountains was very poignant. Antarctica, as you're guessing, is a pretty silent place to begin with, but after saying goodbye to him, it was a little extra quiet, and very powerful to just be in that quiet and to realize that we had 550 kilometers to go. And you start at 200 feet and you end at 14,500 feet. So progressively you're getting higher and it gets colder. And it just got a bit intense from from the get-go after leaving Thiel's Mountains. This is me not having the best of day. You're meant to have this little hole thing over your mouth, but it like got frozen in the wrong position, and I felt like I was getting waterboarded for like 6 hours. And at the end of the day, I ripped that off because I was really frustrated, and I promptly ripped off a good part of my beard and had blood, and it wasn't a good end of the day. And the solar panels started to have trouble, and everything just was decaying effectively. And this was our Christmas effort, doing as good as we could. Stinky socks in our faces, cups that hadn't been washed for a good month, but that was our effort for Christmas. It was the little things out there that really just, we had all of these like tiny little sort of bears and a couple of sort of stars, and we made our effort for Christmas. It was like maybe 7 grams worth of extra weight, but that's what we brought for Christmas, and Christmas meant something. And look at Carl's face, he's super happy, and look at what the cup he's drinking out of. Like, most people wouldn't be super happy in that situation next to stinky socks and drinking out of a cup like that. And it's actually pretty funny. We had a sponsor from Argyle and whiskey up in Scotland, and they gave us this sort of thing of whiskey like this, and we saved it for Christmas, and they promptly send us an in-reach saying, don't drink the whiskey, it hasn't been anodized. And we're like, we don't know what that means, we're going to still drink it. And we all divvy up the whiskey and have the whiskey and drink it, and then we look at the bottom of our cups, and there's these like little bits of metal, and we're like, all right, well, a little heavy metal poisoning in 10 years shouldn't be the worst thing. But we just did our best for Christmas, and that was definitely my favorite day. After, I think that was 40 days in, and about 43 days in, my feet started to go to hell. I started getting blisters and frostbite, and then things just got a little bit weird, to be honest. This is me just, having a bit of a weird day, and I started seeing faces and shapes in the ice. I started hearing things that weren't there. Things really just got a bit strange. And then I know some of you are eating. I'm not meaning to gross you out. Then my feet actually did start to fall off. I got proper frostbite, not only on this toe, but on my hands, on my cheek, bits of black on my face. Like literally, Antarctica was eating me away like onion layers. And that was minus 45 degrees when my feet actually started falling off. And that was the coldest day that day. We just sat in the tent. It was too cold to do anything. It was blowing about 50 knots, minus 45 degrees Celsius without wind chill. So with wind chill, pretty nippy. And all I could think of was being back in my garden in California with my feet in the soil and eating fresh fruit. And unfortunately, that wasn't an option, and had to put my feet back into frozen boots and ski another 9 hours a day. And I really like this image. We had a drone, and I sometimes thought like the aliens are just looking down at us and laughing, like, what are these kooks doing, like skiing 9 hours a day, having their feet fall off to try and prove a point about something. And I think it's really important that we all give ourselves that reminder of purpose, because it's so easy to lose track of what we're doing. And without that reconfirmation of what we're doing, I think we can really fall into loops of depression and not of anxiety. And I think it's just really important. And out there, it's like so poignant that you don't have anything. You just have white, literally like 360 degrees. Each direction is just the same. It's like being on an ocean of snow. And you really got to remind yourself of that purpose, or you just go mad. And I think really when my feet were at their worst and I'm looking down and they're black, and I just remembered that I was in that situation by choice. And I think so many people are in situations by circumstance. You walk past people at King's Cross, or people in extreme living situations, or extreme poverty, or whatever it may be, and they're not in those situations because they chose to be. It's because life has put them in that situation. And I think everyone in this room has that freedom of choice. And I think it's really important that when things are tough, when you're having a hard moment with your boss, when you're having a hard moment with deadlines, that we remember that we do have choice, we do have freedom. And for me, it was just a big reminder to always just be remembering that I was in that situation by choice, even though it sucked. These really cheered me up. These are called parhelions. These are from the ice crystals. They're literally rainbows around the sun, and then these light orbs go around like the entire circumference, and then you have a rainbow straight above you, which is not normal, and pretty beautiful to experience that. And about, I think it was 10 nautical miles out from the South Pole, instead of having this looming figure from behind, there was a figure coming out to meet us, and I knew there was only one madman who that could be, and sure enough, it was my father, and he came out to meet Carl, myself, and Martin, and you can imagine, Yorkshire, born and bred, pretty tough fella, not the biggest hugger, but this hug, that was a big hug. That was like a 10-second hug, and just one that I will never forget. It was a very beautiful moment indeed, and we skied in to the South Pole together, and Captain Scott, who inspired him to ski to the South Pole in the 80s. Unfortunately, they were a bit sad-faced that the Norwegians had beaten them, and all of them died on the return journey. So, not the best portrait, but that was them reaching the South Pole. That was my dad reaching the South Pole. He also had his fair share of just chaos when he arrived, because on his expedition they had to sail down to Antarctica and then winter over, as Captain Scott did, and then just as the summer was starting, start their 70-day journey to the South Pole. And the day he got to the South Pole, his ship sunk that was meant to come and pick them up from the coast. So similar to Captain Scott, I think they had this photo taken, they're all pretty smiley, and then the base camp commander comes out and be like, by the way, gentlemen, your ship sunk, and you couldn't assure a ship that far south. So they were all a bit disturbed. But they made it, and sure enough, Carl, myself, and Martin made it. But I can assure you, and I'm sure many of you have had these moments in life of anticlimax, this was definitely the biggest anticlimax moment in my life. You spend 2 years of preparation, 25 sponsors, 2 months of walking 1,000 kilometers, frostbite, bit of insanity, and then you ski up to your goal and you look at it, and then it reflects yourself back at you, and you're like, all right, that was totally pointless. And it was. But so much of what we do is pointless. And I think we got to imbued that point in what we do. And I'm really glad that I had something ongoing after the South Pole trip, because I think I would have fallen into a bit of depression, to be honest. And I think a lot of explorers do after spending 2 months in a place like that. And I'm going to explain what I am doing now. But I think the even more poignant moment was looking out of the aeroplane, and what took me 2 months, 4 hours in a plane, and you're looking down at all of that ice, and you're like, yeah, flying's definitely easier. But we did it, and I'm bloody proud that I did it, because it took some effort. And especially as a young person, I think that there's a lot of people talking about sustainability and talking about renewable energy, but you have to be pretty stupid and fairly resilient to actually walk the talk and drag an extra 20 kilos of solar panels and ice melters and biofuel and all of this stuff, and lithium batteries and vacuum flask and all of this stuff to prove a point that if we can survive in Antarctica for 2 months of clean energy, why can't we do it more in London? Why can't we do it more in Mumbai? Why can't we do it more in Australia or Africa? And we really just wanted to prove a model of not only using more clean energy, but decarbonizing, and that's what we did through planting those 2,000 trees. And then I came back to London, which was, pretty poignant after 2 months of ethereal whiteness to then be back into grey. I was on the Central Line, going to a meeting 2 days, 1 day after coming back from the South Pole, and everyone was on their phone. Not just I think it was the universe trying to prove a point. I was literally sitting there and sort of the tube shaking, and I'm looking around, and every single person's either got something in their ears or they're looking at their phones, and I'm like, what are we doing? And I understand you work for Google. I'm not saying we don't need technology. I understand that we need technology, but it felt like we were getting used by it instead of using it and choosing how to use it. It was more of a distraction rather than a tool. And to be honest, it's taken me actually about a year and a bit to bounce back from that attitude of viewing it as a distraction rather than a tool to change the world, which it is. And I believe it really is, if we can elevate from a sort of baseline of cat videos and TikTok and all of this stuff that seems to be not really serving a higher purpose rather than instant gratification. But this was hard. Coming back to 8,000 emails, hundreds of voice messages, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of this stuff just descending after 2 months of not having a shower, which is pretty excessive even for an English person, and 2 months of no internet. And then suddenly having a shower, which was great, but then all of this internet hitting like a ton of bricks. It was really, really, really overwhelming. And then just to rub it in even more, I went to the World Economic Forum. I was invited there by Richard Edelman and their PR company, and to do some speaking there. And I was just kind of a bit sort of gobsmacked, to be honest. It just felt like everyone was more concerned with their job title rather than actually talking about real impact, more concerned about themselves rather than the holistic whole that we are like literally holding right now as a species of like, what are we going to do in this next 10 years to like shift the pendulum to really align ourselves with getting our act together very quickly. And it just felt like it was more of an ego puff show than actually like ground zero for making change happen. And I've been to COP events, I've been to United Nations Climate Week twice, been to all kinds of these events. And for me, I kind of get why Greta's a bit pissed off. And I understand that a lot of people view her in a bit of a not the best light because she points fingers. And I kind of agree that we can't really be pointing blame and saying corporations are evil, banks are evil, big data's evil, all of this stuff, and then just this stuff's good, this stuff's bad. But I do get her perspective because as a young person going to these events, I didn't feel like I felt relevant. I was like walking around in slippers because I couldn't put my feet into dress shoes with a suit. And I felt like this sort of token explorer walking around that was like, oh, there's a token explorer kid who just skied to the South Pole, instead of actually being taken what's even like quarter seriously. And I think young people need to be listened to a little bit more. And I think Davos was just a big reminder of that. And instead of abandoning ship and just going back to Australia and going to the rainforest and just chilling out on a beach, I really wanted to do something that really focused on relevant solutions that can just actually make some real things happen. And I'm not saying that there are not thousands of people who are doing that, but I just wanted to create my own version of that. And so I created the ClimateForce Challenge, which is my 7-year mission to reduce 360 million tons worth of CO2 before 2025. And to put that into perspective, you saw at the beginning that big bubble, which represented 1 ton of CO2. The average English person uses 12 tons of CO2 a year, the average American 20 tons, the average Saudi 28 tons, and the average sub-Saharan African uses 4 tons. So as I said before, we all use different amount of CO2 on average, and I think the average millionaire uses close to 90 tons a year. So obviously it depends on what you're doing, how much you travel, how much you consume, but I really want to help both businesses, individuals, and communities really just take responsibility to integrate solutions that can reduce our impact, restore directly through decarbonization, and really connect through service and experience to make the whole conversation and storytelling piece a little bit more tangible. And so that was my mission that I wanted to create after coming back from the South Pole and feeling a little bit disenfranchised with Davos and the likes of what was going on with the conversation in general. So I'm going to go through some examples of integratable solutions right now. Trash. I'm kind of shocked, to be honest. I think that as a nation, we've got a lot of things going on that are a little skeptical in the policy department. But why is there so much trash in London? Like it's kind of shocking. Central London needs to be way cleaner than it is. And I'm not saying we need to all go and like use our hands to pick it up, but like, even if just 1 in every 100 person has one of those picky up sticks in a bag, and like even if it's just on your own community street. Like, let's just make an effort to not walk past trash. It's not the trashman's job. Like, it's our planet. And especially if you're near a water source, I think it's just really important that we feel inspired to clean up after ourselves. And this is in Australia 2 weeks ago. Over 2 weekends, we cleaned up 500 kilos of trash and 2 fridges, as you do. And I think it's just really important that we feel inspired to clean up. It should be seen as cool. It should be seen as the right thing to do. And I'm just trying to promote both big scale and just personal cleaning up challenges. And the whole reforestation piece, I think, is really important. It's one of the quickest ways that we can decarbonize. And even if it's just getting a few more cactuses in your office, or a few more houseplants at your home, or being a part of donating, $1 for a tree through a verified forestry project. And they are out there. I know the whole industry sometimes get a bit of a scoff because people don't think that they grow. And yes, they are people who take your money and don't do what they say they do, but there are people out there who really do make it happen. And I think it's just important that we feel inspired to regreen the world, because our forests are needing to be restored. And in regards to water filtration, whether it's reverse osmosis in your house, so you don't need to use plastic bottles all the time, or a personal water filtration device like this that can do 500 liters of water a year. If you go into places like Vietnam or India, you're not going to be wanting to drink the tap water, but with this you can, as long as it's not radioactive. It filters 99% of the water, of the bacteria out of the water. And just generally thinking about water efficiency, everyone talks about the 10-year mark of sorting out our infrastructure and mobility and energy issues, but a fact that I think people don't talk about enough is in 10 years our global supply for water will outreach our global demand for water will outreach our global supply. And when that happens, we're going to see some really big things go on. So just generally, we need to be talking more about water, and it is our most valuable resource. And just generally, I think I do a lot of work in Asia, in Singapore. I really encourage young people to look at an image like this and be like, yes, that would be great to have that. But it's not necessarily going to make you happy. And I think it's just important that we just reduce the amount that we want. And yes, it's nice to have the new iPhone. It's nice to have the fancy car. It's nice to have the beautiful apartment. But there is this sort of quest and this need for always wanting more that I think we really need to slow down if we're going to manage getting to the end of this century a little bit more sustainably. And I like this view, sure, but personally I like this view a lot more. This is near Yosemite, where I live in California, just a tent. And I personally think that's a lot cooler. And generally just trying to encourage people to, we don't all need to go vegan tomorrow, but just generally just slowing down that meat consumption a little bit. And it doesn't need to be meatless Monday. You're not losing anything, but try and incorporate new things to your diet. I haven't had meat for 3 months. It's a bit of a pain in the ass. I smell chicken, I smell bacon, I want it. But having that moment of restraint has actually made me feel a lot more empowered, because you make a decision 3 times a day of what you put into your mouth, and it really does have a big impact. So just consider that, please. And just generally making people's voice heard a lot more. You all work in Google, you'll manage data, you manage a lot of things, but generally we need to be using and getting people to use their voice a little bit more and in different ways, because clearly classic voting isn't working, and we need to be using technology to get people's voice and their demands heard. And using this pretty amazing technology called Joro, which is an automated carbon tracking device. You put in your credit card and it tracks your CO2 emissions through your credit card expenditure. I'm working with BNP Paribas to get all of their employees, 150,000 of them, to be using this with their business credit cards. And this is available now. I'm partnered with them. And they're the best in the business right now for personal tracking of CO2. If you're looking at 150,000 employees, you get more corporations using this. You see, 20% reductions over a big mass of people. We're talking about a lot of CO2 savings. So those are some of the integratable things that I'm trying to push. And now I'm going to go through some of the big scale restorative projects that are really going to be changing how we are doing things on a bigger scale. Data centers. I know a lot of you know a lot about data centers, and I think a fact that I share a lot, which I'm sure some of you know in this room, but right now our global emissions from data centers are about 4.9% of global emissions come from data centers. By 2040, that will be close to 15%. And once that reaches that number, that will be more than the aviation sector. So pretty crazy that just using your phones, cybercurrency, Bitcoin, Spotify, Netflix, streaming, all of these things, that will be more impact than the entire aviation sector. So we really need to decarbonize these and make them a lot more energy efficient. This is Ven. They're a Iceland company who are 100% geothermal and carbon positive, which, we just need to be managing our data and where we get it from a little bit more responsibly, because I think the average smartphone is 1.5 tons a year of CO2. So you have two phones, that's almost as much CO2 impact as the average sub-Saharan African, which is pretty crazy to think about. And coral restoration, I come from Australia, Great Barrier Reef is my home, and the coral reefs are definitely struggling, but they're not all dead, and we need to be restoring them. And genetically modified coral can be up to 3 degrees resistant to temperature, so really trying to get that pushed out. And direct air capture, CCS, carbon capture and storage, has been around for a long time, but direct air capture is the new thing that really excites me. Each one of these models sequesters 50 tons of CO2 a year straight out of the sky. It doesn't need an existing emissions output to work. And the pretty remarkable thing with this technology is that you can actually capture it, and you can either sequester it into the bedrock, you can either put it into making carbonated beverages, or anything that has that straight CO2 need, or the really amazing thing right now, you can actually use CO2 to make assets, so ethylene and ethanol-based products. You can make synthetic fuels, you can make plastic-based products, but obviously not from petroleum, and you can make brick and mortar. You can actually make silicon, basically something very similar to silicon for tech-related products. So CO2, direct air capture, and that whole circular economy piece, I'm really trying to push that. Makes me really excited, this. And on top of reforestation, we need to be focusing more on mangroves. They get very overlooked, but they're a barrier for our planet, and the sea level rise, and they sequester up to 5 times as much as forests. So we need to be looking after our mangroves. These are in Australia, near where I live. And these are pretty amazing technology. This is a hydro panel. So basically it's solar, and then these patches here are vacuum, and basically this can get 800 liters of water from ambient air in a month. So if you're looking at a place like Australia right now, in southern Australia, where entire communities are just running out of water and they're shipping in bottled water, if you have these, literally you can get 800 liters of water in as low as 2% ambient humidity, which is pretty amazing. And that's only now. So another 10 years in this tech, that will be, producing a lot of water. So really trying to push people towards that. Kelp forest, you can make food out of it, sequesters insane amount of CO2, really trying to push that. And Australia is really leading the way in the kelp forest department. And just really trying to encourage sites like this to be viewed as a potential rather than a sad image. I mean, if we should be mining landfills instead of mountains, we should be taking charge of recycling. It's kind of shocking that we're just putting all of this expectation on China, Indonesia to be recycling our products. Why are we not taking charge in making assets out of our waste? And there's a huge gap that we're just missing in regards to creating actual, real, cost-effective recycling facilities. And yes, it probably will take a little bit of financial incentive to actually get that cost point to where it's efficient, but we really need to be working on waste to asset right now, because plastic, as you all know, is a very, very big issue. So that's some of my big-scale restore partners that I'm trying to push businesses and individuals towards from an investment standpoint, or just getting people to know about it, because I think most of those things are pretty hopeful, and I think the more we can get people understanding about them, the better. And then the connection piece is where Fadan came to the Arctic last year, up to Svalbard. We saw what's going on up in the high Arctic, take people to Costa Rica to plant trees, see what the Costa Rican government's doing. They're really taking charge. Pretty amazing, actually, what Costa Rica's doing. Taking people to Antarctica. That's a little boat worth of people there, and it shows you the scale of the place. And again, to Iceland and to Kilimanjaro. Kilimanjaro in February, I planted 3,000 trees with Jane Goodall. She's definitely a warrior. She was out planting trees with a cast, well, like a sling. Pretty hardcore lady, I reckon. And all of these expeditions are carbon positive. And I think there is obviously a little devil's advocate in the back of my head saying, like, is it really worth me taking people to these fragile places? Is the damage of me taking them there outweigh the impact that we create? And I believe that if we make it, 75% carbon positive, not just carbon neutral, but like really, really push back a lot more through direct impact like tree planting and some of those other big scale restore partners, I really do think it is important that we get people to understand these fragile frontiers that are really experiencing climate change. I hope that you felt inspired coming to the Arctic and have come back feeling like you are an ambassador for these changing places. And we have all of these expeditions running each year, and fundamentally we create very tangible commitments that people and businesses can do when they return home. And I'm just really trying to encourage just young people to just moving a little bit away from the boxes. It's kind of pretty scary sometimes seeing kids and how quickly and how engrossed they get with technology. And like I said before, I'm not demifying technology. We need to have kids to be technologically literate or they'll fall behind. But at the same time, being just engrossed at a young age in these digital environments, there needs to be a balance of getting out, being covered in mud, getting scraped knees, being curious about what's around the tree or what's up the tree or whatever. Being outside, I think, is just so important that we really remind and push children towards that. And not just children, just getting people to share the outdoors. And even if it's just going to Regent's Park, just to go and sit when it's not pouring with rain, and just, being outside, I think it's really important. Working in an office like this, I'm sure that you all would like to do that more, but being busy and having that hustle of being tired, and I know what it's like. I'm pretty exhausted right now myself, but nature is medicine, and it doesn't need to be Yosemite, but just generally really encouraging people to connect with the outdoors, because if we don't have that connection, we're really not going to bother protecting it. So especially with that younger generation, we really need to be inspiring them to just maintain that connection. And I have my little virtual reality story. It's a 5-minute story of skiing to the South Pole, coming back, talking about effectively the story that I've just yapped on about in 5 minutes, but in that full 360 experience. And I think it's just a nice way to share it with people who sometimes don't have that opportunity to go out, especially if you're disabled or have mobility issues or just don't have the time. So this is my life. This is my commitment. It's taking a lot out of me. It's taking a lot of effort, to be honest. It's not easy, and but I think it's just unbelievably important right now that I push everything I can towards the story that I'm sharing with you today. And it's not my story, it's our story. It's our planet that we're dealing with. It's our air that we're dealing with. It's the water that we drink. It's the food that we eat. That's what we're literally playing with right now over this next 10 years. And while there is a threat there, we need to be viewing it as an opportunity, not just from a hippy-dippy tree-hugging standpoint, but a really good business opportunity, really good opportunity to implement technology applications that can help people along that journey. And coming back to my grandma, that ripe old age of 104, 32,000 days on planet Earth, 920,000 hours. If I ever get to 104, which is unlikely at this rate, but if I do, I'd like to just sit back and know that I really just pushed everything I could towards doing good for our planet and being held accountable to metrics and impact and not greenwashed anything. It needs to be real. It needs to be accountable. And I really hope that all of you, through working for such a powerful company such as Google can be a part of just driving that, not through ClimateForce. I mean, I'm not selling anything here, but I hope I'm reminding you just to keep that little care for the planet in the back of your head when you're going through making decisions, even if it's just how you're navigating the kitchen, how you're prepping food at night, whatever it may be. I think our planet needs a little bit more love right now. And the responsibility doesn't really lie with anyone but us. The buck ends with our generation, and doesn't matter how old you are. I think our generation is, we're entering 2020 soon. It's kind of has a bit of a buzz to it, and I hope the 20s can be one that we'll be really proud of leading towards the end of this century, because it's a poignant year what we're entering in a couple of months, so 1 month. And I'm going to be skiing back to the South Pole with my father. He's actually just started his, when I mentioned he got pulled out 450 kilometers in, he's actually starting his journey, finishing off that journey, which he couldn't finish with me. So he's going to be doing that 550 kilometers with Kyle, and he's actually starting that today. So send him a little bit of love down south, because he's scared to the bone of failing again, but I know he's not going to, because he's trained hard and he's far more prepared. And I'm going to be joining him for 100 kilometers on January the 2nd for 2 weeks with a small team. So that's going to be happening in the start of the 20s, which sounds pretty cool. This is my story. And like I said, I'm not trying to preach any doom and gloom. I just hope I've shared some fun opportunities and some fun technology, and generally just created a little bit of a hopeful narrative to something that seems to be soaked in bad news. I'm a bit over scrolling through news feeds, and everything seems to be very negative. And we all have an opportunity to be pushing some more good news content. And I think good news really is what we need right now, because no one's inspired by negative. We need to be pushing that positive. Perfect. Yep. And I think we've got 10 minutes or so for any questions.
Firstly, thank you very much for the talk. That was really interesting and really inspiring. So some of the things that you mentioned as actions we can take away obviously require a little bit of preparation, a little bit more time, even if it's just go to the supermarket and get one of those grabby thingies. If you could give us all one action that we can take away and implement within 5 minutes that will make a difference, what would you say that would be, if nobody else takes anything away from this?
I can give you 3 that I try and preach to most people. So it's shifting our diet. Most of us already had lunch, but if you haven't, considering something that maybe doesn't have beef or lamb or pork in it, just choosing more plant-based. Like I said, doesn't mean you have to go vegan tomorrow, but just shifting a little bit away from as much meat consumption, and consuming more effectively, just really thinking about what you're consuming, asking, do I really need this? Is this the best option? Is it sourced locally? Is this going to be, do I choose the wine that's important from Argentina, or do I choose the wine from France that's going to require obviously a lot less transport to get here? Just little micro decisions on how we consume. And then I think the whole offsetting piece is really important. I'm sure we all fly in here. Next time you fly, even if it's just a couple of trees, I think it's really important. I don't like the word offsetting. I think it's synonymous with a lot of bad sort of hoaxy things, but I think personally I like the word cleaning up. I think our world needs a little bit of a clean up right now. And so I think those 3 things, consuming more responsibly, being more conscious with our diet, and cleaning up effectively our emissions are the 3 big things that all of us can do, which pretty much are everyday choices. So those are the 3.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.